Everyone laughed when the veteran bought a dead vineyard, until his dog uncovered what was buried beneath it. Caleb Hayes had nothing left, no family, no future, and a mind that wouldn't let him rest. So when he spent his last dollars on a dry, forgotten vineyard in the hills of Oregon, people called it madness. The land was cracked, lifeless, silent. But his dog, Titan, refused to believe it was empty. What they discovered beneath that dead soil would change everything, not just the land, but the man who thought he was beyond saving. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? The first thing Caleb Hayes noticed about the land was the silence, not the peaceful kind, not the kind people drove hours to find. This silence felt abandoned, like something had once lived here, struggled, and then given up. Dust rolled across the cracked ground in slow, restless spirals. The rows of what used to be grapevines stretched across the hillside like brittle bones, twisted and gray, reaching for a sky that hadn't answered in years. Even the wind sounded tired as it passed through them. Caleb stood there with one hand resting on the rusted gate, his grip tight but steady. The metal creaked under his touch, loud in the emptiness. Behind him, the engine of his old truck ticked as it cooled, the last sound of the outside world fading away. "Well," the realtor had said earlier, shifting uncomfortably beside the truck, "this is it." He had tried, really tried, to talk Caleb out of it. "No irrigation, no working well. Soil's been dead for at least a decade," he'd added, avoiding eye contact. "Oh, most folks wouldn't take this land for free." Caleb didn't respond then. He didn't respond now. Words had become something distant to him. Optional. Heavy. He just nodded once, like a man signing off on something already decided long before he arrived. The realtor lingered a moment longer, then sighed. "You sure about this?" Caleb's eyes stayed on the land. "Yeah," he said quietly. That was all. Now the man was gone. The dust from his car had long settled, and what remained was Caleb, and the land no one wanted, and Titan. The German shepherd stepped out from the passenger side of the truck, landing lightly on the dry ground. His ears were alert, eyes scanning the open terrain with a calm, steady focus. He moved with purpose, not hesitation, circling once before stopping beside Caleb. Titan didn't look at the dead vines, while he looked past them. Caleb exhaled slowly, the breath catching halfway in his chest before forcing its way out. He reached down absent-mindedly, his fingers brushing against Titan's neck. The dog leaned into the touch without hesitation, grounding him in a way nothing else could. "Home," Caleb muttered, though the word didn't quite belong here. Not yet. Maybe never. He pushed the gate open. It groaned in protest, a long, drawn-out sound that echoed faintly across the valley. Titan stepped through first, nose low, sniffing the ground as if reading something invisible written into the dust. Caleb followed. Each step crunched under his boots. The earth didn't give. It didn't bend. It didn't welcome him. It just endured him. The shack sat at the far edge of the property, leaning slightly to one side like it had been waiting for permission to fall. Its wood was faded, sun-bleached, and cracked. One window hung crooked, the glass smudged with years of neglect. The roof sagged in two places, and something inside creaked when the wind pushed against it. Caleb stopped a few feet away, staring at it. He'd seen worse. He'd lived through worse. That thought came without warning, dragging something sharp with it. A sound. Not here. Not now. A memory. The distant pop of gunfire. The metallic ring of something hitting concrete. A voice shouting, too fast, too urgent. Caleb blinked hard. The shack snapped back into focus. The silence returned. He swallowed, jaw tightening, forcing the past back into whatever corner of his mind it had crawled out from. His hand pressed briefly against his chest, as if steadying something inside. Titan had gone still, the dog's head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on Caleb, not the land, not the shack. Him, always him. "I'm fine," Caleb said, though his voice came out rough, like it hadn't been used in days. Titan didn't move, didn't believe him. After a moment, Caleb let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but not quite. He shook his head once, then stepped forward again. Inside, the shack smelled like dust, old wood, and something faintly sour. The floorboards creaked under his weight. A single table sat near the center of the room, one leg uneven, leaning slightly. There was a mattress in the corner, thin, worn, but usable. It would do. Everything in Caleb's life now existed under that phrase. It would do. He dropped his duffel bag onto the table. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Titan padded in behind him, claws clicking softly against the wood before settling near the doorway, facing outward. Guarding. Always guarding. Caleb glanced at him. "You can relax," he said quietly. Titan didn't. The wind slipped through the cracks in the walls, carrying with it a low, hollow sound as it passed through the dead vineyard outside. It wasn't loud, but it lingered, like something trying to be heard. Caleb sat on the edge of the mattress, elbows resting on his knees. His hands hung loosely between them, fingers slightly curled, as if still holding on to something long gone. He stared at the floor. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Time didn't move the same way out here. Eventually, his gaze drifted toward the doorway. Titan was still there, unmoving. Watching the land like it mattered. Caleb followed his line of sight. All he saw was emptiness. "You picked a great place, huh?" he murmured, the corner of his mouth twitching faintly. Titan's ears flicked, but he didn't turn. Caleb leaned back slowly, the wood creaking under his weight. His eyes traced the ceiling, following the cracks in the beams, the subtle sag of the structure. This place wasn't alive, but it wasn't completely dead either. It was waiting. For what? He didn't know. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the dry rows of vines. The land took on a deeper color, burnt gold fading into gray. The air cooled slightly, but the silence remained. Unbroken. Caleb closed his eyes. For a moment, there was nothing. No noise, no memory, no weight. Just stillness. Then, a sound. Soft, and barely there. His eyes snapped open. Titan was already on his feet. The dog stepped forward, just one pace, head lowered slightly, ears sharp, listening. Caleb held his breath. The sound came again. Faint, almost swallowed by the wind. He frowned, pushing himself up slowly, every movement controlled. "What is it?" he whispered. Titan didn't answer. He just stared, out toward the vineyard, toward a specific spot, a place Caleb hadn't noticed before. The dog's body went still, focused, like something deep in his instincts had locked onto it. Caleb followed his gaze. There was nothing there, just dry earth, dead vines, silence. But Titan didn't move, and for the first time since stepping onto that land, Caleb felt it. Not hope, not yet, but something close, something waiting beneath the surface, and something neither of them understood. Not yet. The night settled in slowly, like it didn't want to disturb anything. Cold crept across the land in thin layers, slipping through the cracks of the shack, brushing against Caleb's skin without asking permission. The wind had quieted, but the silence remained, thick, watchful, pressing in from all sides. Caleb lay on the narrow mattress, one arm draped over his eyes, staring into darkness even with them closed. Sleep didn't come. It hadn't come easily in years. Every time he drifted close, something pulled him back. A sound, a memory, a feeling that never quite left. Outside, Titan shifted slightly near the doorway. The dog hadn't moved far since sunset, still positioned between Caleb and the open land, as if guarding against something neither of them could see. Caleb listened to the rhythm of Titan's breathing. Slow, steady, real. He held on to it, because the moment he let go, a crack, sharp, close, Caleb's eyes snapped open. His body reacted before his mind caught up. He was already sitting up, breath shallow, heart pounding hard enough to hurt. His hand reached instinctively toward where a weapon used to be, then stopped halfway. Nothing there. Just air. Just memory. Titan was on his feet instantly, ears forward, body tense. The shack creaked again as the wind pushed against it. That was all it was. Just the wind. Caleb swallowed, forcing his breathing to slow, but the damage was done. The past had already slipped through. Dust turned to sand. Silence turned to noise. And suddenly he wasn't in Oregon anymore. He was somewhere else. Hot, loud, but alive in all the wrong ways. A flash. The smell of smoke. A voice yelling his name. Another flash. Movement in the distance. Too fast, too close. Caleb squeezed his eyes shut, jaw tightening until it hurt. Stop, he muttered under his breath. The shack returned. The cold, the quiet. Titan stepped closer this time, pressing his body against Caleb's leg. Not forceful, not urgent. Just there, grounding him. Caleb exhaled slowly, his hand lowering until it rested on the dog's head. His fingers curled into the thick fur, holding on tighter than he meant to. I know, he whispered. Titan didn't move away. Minutes passed before Caleb leaned back again, but he didn't close his eyes this time. He just stared at the ceiling, listening, to the wind, to the wood, to anything that proved he was here and not somewhere else. So eventually, the dark faded into gray. Morning came without ceremony. The light that slipped through the broken window wasn't warm. It was pale, distant, like it didn't belong to this place either. Caleb stood outside, boots crunching against the dry ground. The vineyard looked worse in daylight. Every flaw was clearer. The vines were more twisted than he remembered, the soil more cracked, the emptiness more complete. No birds, no insects. Nothing moved. Except Titan. The dog moved ahead of him, weaving between the rows, nose low, tracking something invisible. Every few steps he paused, ears shifting slightly, then continued, focused, intent. Caleb watched him for a moment, then looked away. Nothing out here, he said under his breath, more to himself than to the dog. But Titan didn't seem convinced. Yet Caleb walked further into the vineyard, his boots leaving faint prints in the dust. He crouched down near one of the vines, reaching out to touch it. The wood was brittle under his fingers, dry enough to crumble if he pressed too hard. Dead. That's what everyone said. He picked up a handful of soil and let it fall through his fingers. Powder. No moisture. No life. No future. He stood again, scanning the horizon. The mountains in the distance stood silent, their peaks still capped with traces of snow that never seemed to reach this land. Too far. Too late. Behind him, Titan let out a low sound, not quite a bark, not quite a growl. Caleb turned. The dog was standing still again, staring toward the same area as the night before. His posture had changed. More alert now, more certain. Caleb frowned. "What is it?" he asked, walking closer. Titan didn't look at him, didn't move, just stared. Caleb followed his gaze. There was nothing there. Just another stretch of dry vines, no different from the rest. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You're chasing ghosts," he muttered. But Titan stepped forward. One step, then another, slow, deliberate. Caleb hesitated, then followed. They moved through the rows together, the ground uneven beneath their feet. The air felt heavier here, though Caleb couldn't explain why. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe it was nothing. Titan stopped abruptly. His paw pressed into the dirt. Then he began to dig. At first it was slow, controlled, like he was testing something. Caleb watched, arms crossed loosely. "Hey," he said, his voice tired. "Leave it." Titan didn't stop. The digging became faster, but more urgent. Dirt kicked up behind him in dry bursts, scattering across the cracked ground. Caleb's irritation flared. "Titan!" Still nothing. The dog was locked in, focused in a way Caleb had seen before, but never like this. Caleb stepped forward, grabbing lightly at the dog's collar. "That's enough." Titan resisted, not aggressively, but firmly. He pulled forward just enough to keep digging. Caleb paused. Something in that resistance felt different. Not disobedience, conviction. He slowly released his grip. "Fine," he said quietly. Titan dug harder. The sound of claws against dry earth filled the air, sharp and rhythmic. The hole deepened faster than it should have, the soil loosening beneath the surface. Caleb crouched down, watching more closely now. The ground here wasn't the same. Still dry, but softer. Strange. Titan paused for half a second, ears flicking. Then he dug again, harder, faster. Caleb leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "What are you—" Titan stopped, completely. His head tilted slightly, listening. Caleb held his breath. At first there was nothing, just the wind brushing faintly against the vines. Then, something else. So soft it barely existed. A sound beneath the sound. Caleb's brow furrowed. He leaned closer to the ground. "Wait." Titan didn't move. The silence stretched. Then it came again. Faint. Distant. But unmistakable. Caleb's chest tightened. "No." He pressed his hand into the dirt, fingers digging slightly into the loose soil. And there it was. Not loud, not clear, but real. A low, continuous murmur, like something moving where nothing should. Caleb looked at Titan. Oh, the dog looked back this time. And in that moment, they both knew something was there, something hidden beneath the land everyone had given up on, something that didn't belong to the silence. Caleb slowly stood, his heart beating faster. Not from fear this time, from something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope, not yet, but close. Very close. Caleb didn't move for a long time. He stood over the disturbed patch of earth, eyes locked on the shallow hole Titan had carved into the ground. The faint sound, if it was even a sound, lingered in his mind, slipping in and out of certainty like something just beyond reach. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head once. "No," he muttered. "Could be anything." Wind, shifting dirt, his imagination. Titan didn't agree. The dog lowered his head again, and sniffing the edge of the hole, then stepped back just enough to look at Caleb. Waiting. Caleb stared down at the ground one last time, then forced himself to turn away. Later, he said, because right now, something else mattered more. Water. By midday, the sun had turned unforgiving. It hung overhead like a weight, pressing down on the land with a steady, relentless heat. The air shimmered above the rows of dead vines, distorting the distance. Every breath felt thinner, drier, like it had already been used before it reached his lungs. Caleb wiped his forehead with the back of his arm, sweat mixing with dust across his skin. He moved toward the old pump beside the shack. It stood crooked, rust crawling along its base, the handle worn smooth from hands that had long since stopped trying. He grabbed it anyway, his fingers tightening around the metal. One pull. The pump groaned. Nothing. Another. The sound echoed hollow beneath the ground. Still nothing. Caleb clenched his jaw and pulled harder, the movement sharper now, more forceful. The handle resisted, then gave slightly, then resisted again. Air. Just air. He kept going. Again. 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 Each pull heavier than the last, each one feeding the same empty result. His breathing grew uneven. His hands slipped slightly against the metal. "Come on," he whispered, though there was no reason for it to work. Not now, not here. The pump let out one last dry cough, a hollow, defeated sound, and fell silent. Caleb froze, then slowly let go. The handle swung back into place with a dull, final clunk. That was it. He stood there, staring at it, one chest rising and falling faster than it should. The heat pressed closer, wrapping around him, tightening. For a moment, everything felt too still, too quiet. His throat burned. His tongue felt thick. He turned toward the shack. Inside, a single plastic container sat on the table. He picked it up, unscrewing the cap slowly, as if the motion itself might make the water last longer. There wasn't much left. He tilted it, watching the clear line shift. Enough for one person. Maybe. Titan stepped in behind him, eyes flicking from the container to Caleb's face. Caleb hesitated. Then he grabbed an old metal cup from the corner of the table and poured. The water hit the bottom with a soft, hollow sound. Half the container. Half. He pushed the cup toward Titan. "Drink." The dog didn't move. Caleb frowned. Titan." Still nothing. Titan looked at the cup, then back at Caleb, waiting. Caleb let out a breath that almost turned into frustration. "I said drink." The dog stepped forward slowly, lowered his head, and took a few careful laps. Not rushed, not desperate. Measured, like he was making a choice. After a moment, Titan stopped. He stepped back. Left water in the cup. Caleb stared at it. "You're kidding me," he muttered. Titan sat down. Just watched him. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Heavier. Personal. Caleb picked up the cup. For a second, his hand hovered halfway to his mouth. Then he drank. The water was warm, almost tasteless, but it hit his throat like something real, something grounding. He swallowed slowly, every drop deliberate. When it was gone, he lowered the cup and set it back on the table with a soft clink. "That's it," he said quietly. Not to Titan, to himself. Outside, the heat intensified. The shadows shortened until they barely existed at all. Caleb stepped back into the light, squinting against the brightness. His head felt heavier now, thoughts moving slower, like they had to push through something thick just to form. He looked out across the vineyard again. Same land. Same emptiness. Same silence, except it wasn't the same anymore. Not completely. His eyes drifted almost against his will toward the spot where Titan had been digging. That faint sound pressed against his memory again. Soft. Impossible. Real. Caleb swallowed. No, he said again, quieter this time, but his feet had already started moving, and each step felt heavier than it should have. The heat pulling at him, dragging at his shoulders, his back, his thoughts. The world around him blurred slightly at the edges, like the land itself was pushing back. Titan was already there, standing over the hole, waiting. Caleb reached him, breathing harder now, his chest tight. He crouched slowly, one hand bracing against his knee. Better be something, he muttered. Titan didn't move, didn't blink. Caleb leaned closer to the ground. For a second, nothing. Just silence. Then, there it was. Faint, but clearer now. A low, distant movement beneath the dirt. Not wind, not shifting earth. Something else. Caleb's pulse quickened. He pressed his palm flat against the ground. The soil here was different. Cooler, just slightly. His fingers dug in, was pushing through the dry layer at the surface. Beneath it, the texture changed, less brittle, more compact, holding together instead of falling apart. His breath caught. Titan! The dog stepped closer, watching. Caleb dug faster now, using both hands, ignoring the sting of dirt grinding into his skin. The hole widened, deepened, each movement revealing more of that subtle difference in the earth. Then, a shift. The ground gave slightly under his weight. Caleb froze. A crack formed, thin but visible, running through the base of the hole. He leaned back instinctively. Hold on! Titan moved. One step forward, the crack widened, the dirt shifted again, and suddenly, the ground collapsed. Not violently, but enough. The soil sank inward, forming a narrow opening just beneath where Caleb's hands had been seconds before. Dust rose into the air, catching in his throat, making him cough as he scrambled back. Titan! The dog had already stepped away, ears sharp, body tense but steady. Caleb stared at the opening. Dark, deep, breathing. That was the only way he could describe it. Like the land itself had just taken a breath. The air that rose from it was different. Cool, damp, alive. Caleb's chest tightened again, but not from panic this time, from realization. Slowly, carefully, he leaned forward and listened. No mistaking it now. Beneath the dead vineyard, something was moving, something that should not have been there. Water, real, flowing, hidden beneath years of silence. Caleb let out a short, broken breath that almost sounded like a laugh. You found it, he whispered. Titan stood beside him, steady as ever, not surprised, like he had known all along. Caleb didn't speak for several seconds. He just stared into the narrow opening, chest rising and falling as if he had forgotten how to breathe properly. The dust settled slowly around the edges, revealing more of the space beneath. Dark, uneven, but real. The cool air continued to rise from below, brushing against his face like something alive. He leaned closer. Don't move, he said quietly, though Titan had already gone still. Caleb reached down carefully, brushing away loose dirt with his fingers. The opening widened slightly, enough for him to see past the first layer of collapsed soil. Stone. Not natural. Too smooth in places. Too straight. His brow furrowed. This isn't just a hole. Titan lowered his head beside him, sniffing the edge, yet then pulled back again, as if recognizing something Caleb didn't yet understand. Caleb swallowed, glancing back toward the shack, then across the empty vineyard. No one was there. No sound but the wind. No sign that anyone had been here in years. And yet, this didn't feel abandoned. He sat back on his heels, wiping his hands against his jeans, leaving streaks of dust across the fabric. His heart was still racing, but it wasn't fear pushing it anymore. It was something sharper, focused. "All right," he murmured. "We do this right." He stood slowly and walked back toward the shack, his steps quicker now, more purposeful. Titan followed immediately, staying close at his side. Inside, Caleb moved through the small space with controlled urgency. He grabbed a coil of old rope from the corner, frayed but strong enough. When a flashlight followed, its casing scratched and worn. He clicked it on. The beam flickered once, then held. Good enough. Titan watched him the entire time, ears forward, tracking every movement. Caleb paused at the doorway, glancing down at the dog. "You stay close," he said. Titan didn't need the instruction. They returned to the opening together. The sun had shifted slightly, casting a different angle of light across the vineyard. The hole now sat half in shadow, its edges darker, deeper. Caleb knelt again, testing the ground around it. Still unstable, but manageable. He secured the rope to one of the thicker vine posts nearby, tugging it twice to check its hold. The wood creaked, but didn't give. "All right," he muttered. He lowered the rope into the opening, watching as it disappeared into the darkness. Then he took a breath and stepped in. The drop wasn't far, 6 feet, maybe a little more, but the shift in temperature hit immediately. Cool, damp, alive. His boots touched solid ground, and for a moment, he just stood there, letting his eyes adjust. The light from above faded quickly, leaving him in a dim, enclosed space that smelled faintly of earth and stone. He raised the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, and everything changed. The walls weren't natural. They couldn't be. They were too smooth in sections, too structured, reinforced in places with old timber beams that had darkened with age but still held strong. This had been built, deliberately, carefully. Caleb's breath slowed as he turned in place, scanning the space. What the hell? Above him, Titan's head appeared at the edge of the opening. Stay!" Caleb called up softly. Titan didn't listen. A second later, the dog dropped down beside him with a controlled, quiet landing. His body immediately shifted into alert mode, ears sharp, eyes scanning the tunnel. Caleb exhaled through his nose. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "Figured." Titan moved ahead slightly, nose low, tracking along the ground. Caleb followed, the flashlight beam moving with him, revealing more of the tunnel as they advanced. It stretched forward in a narrow line, sloping slightly downward. And then, Caleb froze. "Wait!" He lowered the light. Along the floor, running beside the stone, was a narrow channel. Clear, moving, water, not dripping, not stagnant, flowing, steady, silent. Caleb dropped to his knees so fast the impact echoed through the tunnel. His hand reached out, hovering for a split second before touching the surface. Cold, clean, real. A sharp sound escaped him, half laugh, half breath breaking apart. "No way!" He dipped his fingers deeper, watching the ripples spread outward, catching the light. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't hope pretending to be something else. It was there. After everything, it was actually there. Caleb leaned forward, his other hand bracing against the ground as his shoulders shook slightly. He hadn't cried at the hospital. Not when they told him. Not when he packed up what was left of his life. But here, in the dark, beneath a dead vineyard, something inside him cracked open. "Water," he whispered. "There's water." Titan stepped closer, lowering his head to the stream. He took a few careful laps, then looked back at Caleb. Caleb laughed once, breathless. "Go on," he said softly. The dog drank again. Caleb sat there for a long moment, both hands now resting in the stream, letting the cold seep into his skin, grounding him in something real. When he finally stood, his legs felt unsteady, not from weakness, but from the shift happening inside him. He lifted the flashlight again, and that's when he saw it. Markings. Faint. Carved into the wall. Lines. Numbers. Symbols he didn't recognize at first glance, but something about them felt familiar. Structured. Measured. Intentional. Caleb stepped closer, brushing his fingers across the surface. "This wasn't random," he murmured. Titan stood beside him, watching. Caleb moved the light further down the tunnel. The water continued, disappearing into darkness beyond what the beam could reach. And the tunnel! It kept going, farther than he could see. He exhaled slowly. "This whole place," his voice trailed off. He turned, looking back toward the opening above where a thin shaft of light cut down into the darkness. Then back at the tunnel, at the water, at the walls someone had built, then left behind. "No one just walks away from something like this," he said quietly. Titan didn't move, didn't need to. Caleb nodded once, more to himself than anything. "Which means," he tightened his grip on the flashlight, "this isn't over." The water flowed on beside them, steady and quiet, like it had been waiting, not for years, for someone. And somehow, against every logical reason, it had been the two of them. Caleb stood in the dim tunnel, the sound of water moving beside him, steady and quiet, like a pulse beneath the earth. For a moment, everything else faded. The dry land above, the empty shack, the weight he had carried for years, all of it replaced by something simple, something undeniable. This place wasn't dead. It had never been. Titan shifted slightly beside him, his paws making soft contact with the packed ground. The dog's posture remained alert, but not tense, focused, like he understood there was more to find. Caleb followed the direction of his gaze, deeper into the tunnel. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in his hand, not from fear, but from anticipation. He adjusted his grip, then took a slow step forward. "Stay close," he murmured. Titan didn't hesitate. They moved together. The tunnel narrowed slightly as they advanced, the ceiling dipping just enough that Caleb had to lower his head. The air grew cooler with each step, heavier with moisture. The faint scent of stone and something metallic lingered beneath it. The water channel continued beside them, unwavering, its surface catching the light in broken reflections. Caleb ran his fingers along the wall as he walked. Smooth. Too smooth. Every few feet the texture shifted, stone giving way to sections reinforced with wood. Old beams darkened with age but still holding firm. Whoever built this hadn't cut corners. This had been planned, engineered, built to last. "Not a farmer," Caleb muttered. His voice echoed faintly, swallowed quickly by the tunnel. Titan stopped suddenly. Caleb nearly stepped into him. "What is it?" The dog's ears sharpened, head angled toward something ahead. Caleb lifted the flashlight. The beam stretched forward, but revealing a slight widening in the tunnel, a shallow recess carved into the wall. Something sat there, half buried, rectangular, metal. Caleb's pulse quickened. He moved closer, crouching down slowly as the shape came into focus. Dirt and dust covered most of it, but the edges were too clean, too defined to be natural. He brushed the surface with his hand. The dust peeled away. A box, old, but intact. Caleb glanced at Titan. "You see this?" Titan remained still, watching. Caleb swallowed, then gripped the edge of the box and pulled. It resisted at first, held in place by years of compacted soil. He adjusted his position, digging his fingers underneath, then pulled again, harder this time. The box shifted, then came free. He set it down carefully on the ground, his breath slow and controlled. The metal was cold under his fingers, the surface scratched but not broken. A latch held it closed. Simple, functional. Caleb hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he opened it. The lid creaked slightly as it lifted, the sound echoing faintly through the tunnel. Inside, paper, folded, layered, preserved. Caleb blinked. Maps? He reached in, pulling one out carefully. The paper was aged but strong, edges yellowed, corners worn from handling long ago. He unfolded it slowly. Lines, precise, measured, a layout, the vineyard, but not as it looked now. This was something else entirely. Beneath the surface, channels, paths, angles marked with exact measurements, water flow directions. Caleb's eyes moved quickly across the page, his breathing slowing as his focus sharpened. This is the whole system. More papers followed. Notes, symbols, markings that felt familiar in a way he couldn't immediately place. Then, he saw it. A stamp. Faint, but still visible in the corner of one page. Government issue. Military. Caleb froze. His fingers tightened slightly around the paper. No. He leaned closer, studying it. There was no mistaking it. He had seen markings like this before. Different place, different time, but the same language, the same structure. This wasn't just irrigation, he said quietly. Titan shifted again, stepping closer. Caleb flipped through the rest of the contents. More diagrams, more notes. Some handwritten, others printed. All of them connected. All of them leading back to one thing. The water. This place, Caleb whispered. Caleb ughed. Oh, it was built for something. He closed the box slowly, his mind racing now, piecing together fragments that didn't fully connect yet. Why hide something like this? Why leave it? Why let the land above die while everything beneath it kept working? The questions stacked on top of each other, unanswered. And then, a sound. Sharp. Above them. Caleb's head snapped up instantly. Titan reacted faster. The dog turned toward the direction of the opening, body tense, a low growl forming in his chest. Caleb killed the flashlight. Darkness swallowed them. The tunnel went silent except for the faint sound of water. They both listened. Another sound. Faint. Distant. But not part of the land. Footsteps. Above. Caleb's pulse spiked. Someone was out there. He moved slowly, carefully, one hand resting lightly on Titan's back, grounding both of them as they stayed still in the dark. The footsteps shifted, paused, then moved again. Closer to the area where the opening was. Caleb held his breath. The silence stretched. Then, gone. The footsteps faded, replaced once again by the wind. Caleb waited. 10 seconds. 20, 30. Still nothing. He exhaled slowly, tension easing just slightly. But not gone. Not even close. He clicked the flashlight back on. The beam cut through the darkness again, steady this time. Caleb looked at Titan. "We're not alone," he said quietly. The dog's ears remained sharp, eyes fixed upward. Caleb picked up the metal box, holding it firmly now. The discovery beneath the land had just changed everything. And now, so had something else. Someone new. Or at least, someone was starting to notice. While Caleb turned toward the opening, his movements slower now, more deliberate. Careful, because whatever this place was, it wasn't just waiting for him. It might have been waiting for someone else, too. Caleb didn't rush out of the tunnel. He stood there for a few seconds longer, listening, really listening, his senses stretched thin, searching for anything that didn't belong. Nothing. Just the steady current of water, the quiet hum of the earth. But the feeling didn't leave. That presence, faint, unseen, watching. He tightened his grip on the metal box, then nodded once to himself. "Let's go." Titan moved first, stepping toward the rope, his body still tense but controlled. Caleb followed, the flashlight beam cutting upward as he approached the opening. The climb back out felt different, heavier, but every movement deliberate, careful not to disturb loose dirt that might collapse again. When his hands reached the edge, he paused, listening once more. Still nothing. He pulled himself up. The sunlight hit him hard, blinding for a second after the darkness below. He squinted, scanning the vineyard quickly. Empty. Exactly as before. But it didn't feel the same. Titan climbed out beside him, landing lightly, then immediately turning in a slow circle, nose working the air. His ears flicked back and forth, tracking something Caleb couldn't see. "Anything?" Caleb asked quietly. Titan didn't respond, but he didn't relax either. Caleb stood slowly, brushing dirt from his hands, eyes narrowing as he studied the land again. The rows of dead vines stretched out in every direction, unchanged. And yet, there, a disturbance. Subtle, but near the far edge of the property, where the dirt met the narrow access road. Tire marks, fresh. Caleb's jaw tightened. Those hadn't been there before. He walked toward them, Titan close at his side. The ground shifted slightly underfoot, but Caleb barely noticed. His focus was locked on the tracks cutting through the dust. They were recent. Too recent. He crouched, running his fingers lightly along the edges. The lines were sharp, not softened by wind or time. "Someone came out here," he muttered. Titan let out a low growl. Caleb stood again, scanning the horizon. The road was empty now, stretching out into nothing, disappearing between the hills. No vehicle, no movement. Just the aftermath. Caleb exhaled slowly, but the tension didn't ease. If someone had come, they hadn't stayed long, which meant they were either passing through or checking something. His eyes drifted back toward the hole, then toward the shack, then back to the road. A pattern formed in his mind, incomplete but enough to raise something sharp inside him. "This place," he said quietly. "It's not as forgotten as it looks." Titan shifted beside him, still alert. Caleb turned back toward the shack. "Come on." Inside, the air felt different now, smaller, less safe. Caleb set the metal box on the table, his movements slower than before. He glanced at the door, then the window, then back at the box. The latch clicked softly as he opened it again. The papers inside hadn't changed, but everything about them had. He spread one of the maps across the table, smoothing it out with his palm. The lines seemed clearer now, more urgent. The channels, the markings, the structure beneath the vineyard. It wasn't just a system. It was a network. Deliberate. Hidden. He leaned closer, tracing one of the paths with his finger. "If this runs across the whole property," he murmured. A sudden sound cut through the thought. Outside. A faint crunch. Caleb froze. Titan was already moving. The dog stepped toward the door, body low, ears forward, a deep growl building in his chest. Caleb's hand instinctively reached for something that wasn't there again, then stopped. No weapon. Not anymore. He moved anyway. Slow. Quiet. Each step controlled as he approached the doorway. The growl deepened. Caleb placed a hand lightly on Titan's back. "Easy." He leaned slightly, just enough to look through the narrow gap of the door. At first, nothing. Then, movement. As a shadow shifting near the side of the shack. Caleb's pulse surged. He stepped out. "Hey!" The word cut through the air, sharp and sudden. The figure moved instantly. A man, tall, broad. He stepped into view just long enough for Caleb to catch a glimpse. Dust-covered boots, worn jacket, eyes that flicked quickly over everything before settling on Caleb. Calculating. Then, he turned and walked away. Not running, not panicked, just leaving, like he had seen enough. "Stop!" Caleb called. The man didn't. He reached a truck parked just out of sight behind a rise in the land. The engine roared to life a second later, tires kicking up dust as the vehicle pulled away down the road. Caleb stood there, watching until it disappeared. Titan barked once, sharp and angry, then took a step forward as if ready to chase. "Oh no," Caleb said firmly. The dog stopped, but his eyes remained locked on the fading dust. Caleb's chest rose and fell slowly as he replayed the moment in his mind. That look. That brief pause before the man left. He hadn't been surprised. He hadn't been lost. He had known exactly where he was and what he was looking at. Caleb turned back toward the shack, his expression tightening. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You weren't just passing through." Inside, he closed the door this time, latched it. Not that it would stop anyone determined enough, but it felt necessary. Titan remained near the entrance, refusing to settle, his posture still rigid, alert. Caleb moved back to the table, staring down at the open box. The maps, the markings, the system beneath the ground. Then he looked toward the window, toward the land beyond. They know," he said under his breath. "Not everything. Not yet. But enough." A low sound drew his attention. Titan. The dog had shifted slightly, his body angled toward Caleb now, eyes steady, waiting. Caleb met his gaze. "Looks like we're not the only ones interested in this place," he said. Titan didn't blink, didn't hesitate. He just stayed there, ready. Caleb exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling into something solid inside him. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was something else. Something bigger. And whatever it was, it had just started to move. The rest of the day passed in a silence that felt different from before. Not empty, not abandoned, but watched. Caleb stayed inside longer than he meant to, going over the maps again and again, as tracing the lines with his finger, as if repetition would reveal something new. The network beneath the land stretched farther than he expected, branching, splitting, feeding into itself with precision that didn't belong to a forgotten vineyard. Titan never left the doorway. Every few minutes the dog shifted, adjusting his position, scanning the horizon with quiet intensity. He didn't bark, didn't pace. He just watched. By late afternoon, the light softened, stretching long shadows across the rows of dead vines. The air cooled slightly, but the tension didn't. Caleb stood, closing the metal box slowly. "We need answers," he said. Titan's ears flicked. Caleb grabbed his jacket, pausing for a second at the door before stepping out. The land looked the same, but now every inch of it felt like it held something back. "Oh, come on." They followed the dirt road leading away from the vineyard, boots and paws moving in rhythm. The path curved between low hills, the silence stretching with them. After about a mile, the land shifted. A small structure came into view. Old, weathered, but standing. A cabin. Smoke didn't rise from it. No lights shone through the windows. But there were signs, subtle ones, that someone still lived there. Tools leaning against the wall. Tracks in the dirt. Caleb slowed his pace. Titan moved slightly ahead, then stopped, waiting for Caleb to catch up. "You smell someone?" Caleb asked. Titan didn't move. Didn't need to. Caleb stepped forward and knocked on the wooden door. Once. Twice. The sound echoed softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, movement inside. Slow. Measured. The door creaked open just enough for a pair of sharp eyes to appear. Old, but not weak. The man behind them studied Caleb without speaking. "You lost?" he asked finally. Caleb shook his head. "No." A pause. Then Caleb added, "I bought the vineyard down the ridge." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Did you?" Not a question. A statement. Caleb nodded. The silence stretched again. Then the man opened the door wider. "You'd better come in," he said. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood and thyme. Not abandoned, but lived in carefully, like every object had its place and purpose. The man moved slowly, leaning on a cane as he crossed the room. "Name's Walter Briggs," he said without turning. Caleb stepped inside, Titan close behind. "Caleb Hayes." Walter nodded once. He lowered himself into a chair with practiced effort, then looked up at Caleb again. Really looked this time. Not at his clothes, not at the dust, at him. "You've been down there," Walter said. Caleb froze. Not visibly, but enough. Walter noticed. "They always go down there eventually," he continued. "The ones who stay long enough." Caleb stepped closer. "What do you know about it?" Walter leaned back slightly, the chair creaking under his weight. "More than I wanted to," he said. Titan moved quietly to Caleb's side, sitting just behind him, eyes fixed on Walter. The old man glanced at the dog. "Good animal," he said. "You'll need him." Caleb didn't respond. Walter's gaze shifted back to him. "That land of yours, it wasn't meant to grow grapes," he said. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "Then what was it meant for?" Walter took a slow breath. "Water," he said. "Oh, control of it." Caleb felt something shift in his chest. The system underground. It wasn't built for farming. Not really. Walter leaned forward slightly, resting both hands on the top of his cane. It was built during a time when people were thinking about survival differently. Long-term, hidden, quiet. Caleb's mind moved quickly, connecting pieces. Military. Walter didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. "Let's just say," the old man said carefully, "some things were built where no one would think to look." The room fell silent. Titan shifted slightly, his ears flicking toward the door, then back again. Caleb stepped closer. "If it was that important, why leave it?" Walter's eyes held his. Because sometimes, he said slowly, leaving something behind is the only way to keep it from being taken. Caleb frowned. That doesn't make sense. Walter gave a faint, humorless smile. It doesn't have to. A pause, then. Tell me, Walter added, have you met Derek Boone yet? The name landed heavier than it should have. Caleb shook his head. Tall, broad, thinks the land around here belongs to him just because he's been watching it longer than anyone else. Caleb's expression darkened slightly. I saw someone earlier. Walter nodded. That'd be him. Titan let out a low, quiet growl. Walter noticed. Yeah, he said. Your dog's got the right idea. Caleb crossed his arms loosely. What does he want? Walter leaned back again. What everyone wants when they realize something valuable's been sitting under their feet this whole time. Caleb's jaw tightened. He knows? Walter's gaze didn't waver. Not everything, he said, but enough to start asking questions. Caleb exhaled slowly. And if he finds out more? Walter didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past Caleb toward the distant hills visible through the window. Then you won't be the only one deciding what happens to that land. The words settled heavily in the room. Titan stood now, moving closer to Caleb, his body brushing lightly against his leg, grounding him. Caleb nodded once. Not happening, he said quietly. Walter studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded back. Good, he said, because that land doesn't belong to people who walk away. Caleb held his gaze. I'm not leaving. Walter's eyes sharpened slightly. Then you'd better learn fast, he said, because whatever's under there. He paused. It wasn't buried by accident. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with understanding. And something else. A warning. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, carrying dust across the dry land. And somewhere in the distance, a truck engine echoed faintly, moving, waiting, watching. The sound of the truck faded into the distance, but the feeling it left behind didn't. It followed Caleb all the way back to the vineyard. The sun had already dropped low by the time he reached the shack, painting the dry land in long streaks of gold and shadow. The vines stood motionless, their twisted forms cutting dark lines across the earth. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. Titan moved ahead of him, scanning the perimeter before stepping inside. His movements were sharper now, more deliberate, like he understood the shift even if Caleb couldn't fully explain it. Caleb closed the door behind them, latched it, then checked it again. The simple action felt unfamiliar. He hadn't locked anything in a long time. There had never been anything worth protecting. Until now. The metal box sat on the table where he had left it. The maps inside felt heavier than before, not physically, but in what they meant. Caleb didn't open it this time. Instead, he moved to the corner of the room, grabbing an old lantern and lighting it. The flame flickered weakly at first, then steadied, casting a soft glow across the shack. Outside, the last light of day slipped away. A darkness settled in quickly, the kind that didn't just surround you. It pressed in. Titan positioned himself near the door again, body angled toward the outside. His ears twitched at every faint sound, every shift in the wind. Caleb sat on the edge of the mattress, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Walter's words echoed in his mind. Not buried by accident. Not forgotten. Watched. He let out a slow breath. Yeah, he muttered. That makes sense. Because nothing in his life had ever been simple. Not before. Not now. A sharp crack from outside snapped his head up. Titan reacted instantly. a low growl building in his chest as he stepped closer to the door. Caleb stood. Slow. Controlled. He moved toward the window, keeping to the side, careful not to silhouette himself against the light inside, and his hand pressed lightly against the wall as he leaned just enough to see out. Darkness. Shapes. Shadows. Nothing clear. But something felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. Then, a sound. Closer this time. A footstep. Caleb's pulse surged. Titan barked once, sharp, warning. The sound cut through the night like a blade. And then, movement. A figure shifted just beyond the edge of the shack, barely visible in the dark. Caleb's voice came out before he could stop it. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the faint crunch of dirt under weight. Titan lunged forward, hitting the door with enough force to rattle the frame. "Easy!" Caleb snapped, grabbing his collar. The dog strained against him, muscles tight, growl deepening into something more dangerous. Caleb held him back. Barely. The footsteps moved again. Faster now, retreating. Then, silence. Caleb stood frozen for a second longer, then shoved the door open. "Hey!" He stepped outside, scanning the darkness. Nothing. No figure. No movement. Just the empty land stretching out under a sky filled with stars. But the air felt different. Disturbed. Titan pulled forward again, dragging Caleb a few steps before he released his grip. The dog ran to the side of the shack, nose low, tracking something across the dirt. Caleb followed. There. Fresh tracks, boot prints, leading away. Fast. Caleb's jaw tightened. "He was here," he said quietly. Titan growled again, following the trail for a few yards before stopping, ears flicking back toward the shack. Caleb looked up, the door, wide open. His stomach dropped. He moved fast. Back inside. The lantern still burned on the table. But the room looked the same, but not quite. Something was off. Caleb stepped forward slowly, eyes scanning every inch of the space. The table, the mattress, the floor. Then, the box. Still there. But shifted. Just slightly. Enough. Caleb approached it. Every step measured. He reached out, lifting the lid. The papers were still inside, but not in the same order. Someone had touched them, gone through them. Caleb closed the lid slowly, his hand tightening against the metal. Titan stepped inside behind him, letting out a low, protective growl. Caleb didn't look at him. He was staring at the door, at the darkness beyond it. "They're not guessing anymore," he said quietly. "They know." The words settled into the room like something permanent. Caleb exhaled slowly, then dragged a hand down his face. All for a moment. Just a moment. The weight came back. Not the land, not the danger, the past, the memory. The same feeling he had tried to outrun by coming here. The sense that no matter where he went, something would follow. Something would find him. His chest tightened. His breathing shifted. Faster. Shallower. The room felt smaller. Closer. Titan moved. Not toward the door. Toward him. The dog pressed against his leg, steady, solid, real. Caleb's hand dropped automatically, gripping the fur at Titan's neck, grounding, holding. "I'm not doing this again," Caleb whispered. His voice wasn't strong, but it wasn't breaking either. "I'm not running." Titan stayed pressed against him, unmoving, unshaken. Caleb closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. Clear, focused, different. And he turned back to the table, picking up the metal box. This time, he didn't hesitate. He didn't question. He didn't doubt. "They came here," he said. "They touched this." He looked down at Titan. "So now," a pause. Then, "We don't wait." Titan's ears lifted slightly. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's right." Outside, the wind picked up again, moving through the dead vines with a low, hollow sound. But beneath it, something else remained. Not just danger, not just tension, purpose. For the first time since he had stepped onto that land, Caleb wasn't just surviving. He was ready. And whatever had been waiting beneath the vineyard was no longer hidden. Caleb didn't sleep that night. Not really. He sat with his back against the wall, the metal box resting beside him. A Titan stretched across the doorway like a barrier between him and the dark outside. The lantern burned low, its light flickering against the wooden walls, casting shadows that moved just enough to keep his mind alert. Every sound mattered now. Every shift of wind. Every creak of wood. Every silence that lasted just a second too long. By the time the sky began to pale, Caleb was already on his feet. "We go back down," he said. Titan was up before the words finished. Outside, the land looked the same, but Caleb didn't see it that way anymore. The dead vines, the cracked earth, the empty stretches of ground. All of it felt like a cover, a surface hiding something much deeper. He moved quickly to the opening, checking the rope, testing the ground around it. Everything held. "Stay sharp," he murmured, when Titan dropped down first this time, controlled, silent. Caleb followed, landing beside him with a steady breath. The cool air wrapped around him instantly, cutting through the dryness that had settled into his skin over the past days. He turned on the flashlight. The tunnel came alive again. But this time, he didn't stop at the water. They moved deeper. The sound of the underground stream followed them, guiding their steps as the tunnel narrowed and curved. The walls grew more defined the further they went, less natural, more deliberate. Titan moved ahead, slower now, more cautious. He stopped once, twice, each time listening, each time confirming something Caleb couldn't hear yet. "Keep going," Caleb said quietly. The beam of the flashlight reached farther than before, catching on something ahead, a break in the wall. It's not just a widening, an opening, squared, clean, built. Caleb's pace slowed. His pulse picked up. "This wasn't on the map," he whispered. Titan approached first, lowering his head, sniffing the edge of the opening. He didn't step in. He waited. Caleb stepped beside him, raising the light, and saw it. A door, or what used to be one. The frame remained, metal reinforced, but whatever had sealed it was gone, broken open long ago. The edges were bent inward, like something had forced its way through. Caleb swallowed. "Someone's been here before," he said. Titan let out a low, uncertain sound. Caleb stepped forward. Inside. The beam of light swept across the space and everything changed again. The chamber was larger than he expected. Not massive, but enough. The walls were lined with old equipment, rusted now, but still recognizable. Metal shelving, crates, panels built into the stone itself. This wasn't a storage space. It was a facility. Small, hidden, purpose-built. Caleb moved slowly, the light drifting across the room as his eyes tried to take everything in at once. "This is military," he said under his breath. Titan stayed close, closer than before. His body brushed against Caleb's leg, as they moved deeper into the chamber. Caleb approached one of the shelves, brushing dust from its surface. Labels. Faded, but still there. Codes. Serial markings. Not civilian. Not random. He turned, scanning the rest of the room. Then, Titan froze. His entire body went still. Caleb followed his gaze to the far corner, where the wall looked different. Not broken. Not open. Sealed, but not completely. But a narrow gap ran along the edge, barely visible. Caleb stepped toward it slowly. What is it? Titan didn't move, didn't blink. Caleb crouched, running his fingers along the edge of the gap. Cold. Metal. A panel. Hidden. He pushed. Nothing. He adjusted his grip, pressing harder this time, shifting his weight into it. For a second, nothing. Then, a click. Soft, but clear. The panel shifted, just slightly. Caleb leaned back. Hold on. He repositioned, then pulled. The panel slid open with a grinding sound that echoed through the chamber, dust falling in thin streams as the mechanism gave way. Behind it, darkness. Deeper. Different. Caleb raised the flashlight. The beam cut through the black and landed on something that made him stop breathing. Crates, stacked, sealed, marked, not empty, not forgotten, but preserved. Caleb stepped closer, his movements slow, almost careful. What the hell is this? He knelt beside one of the crates, wiping away the dust. The markings were still visible. Government issue. Restricted. His chest tightened. This wasn't just about water anymore. This was something else entirely. Something hidden. Something left behind on purpose. Titan moved beside him, nose brushing against the edge of the crate, then pulling back slightly. Uneasy. Caleb noticed. You feel that too? The dog didn't answer, but he stayed close. Closer than ever. Caleb stood slowly, turning in place as the weight of the discovery settled in. The land above, the tunnel, the system. It all led here. To this, and suddenly, the questions changed. Not just what was hidden, but why it had been left, and who else might know. A faint sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Caleb's head snapped toward it. Titan reacted instantly, stepping in front of him, body tense, low growl building again. The sound came again, closer this time. Footsteps. Caleb's grip tightened around the flashlight. No, he whispered. But it was real. Someone else was down here, and they weren't alone anymore. The sound of footsteps carried through the tunnel, slow, deliberate, closing the distance one step at a time. Caleb killed the flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything. Only the faint, distant echo of water remained. Titan moved instantly, stepping in front of him, body low, muscles tight, a deep growl building in his chest. Not loud, controlled, a warning held back. Caleb crouched beside the crates, heart pounding, a breath shallow but steady. He listened. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched. Then, a voice. Low, confident. You can turn that light back on, Hayes. Caleb froze. The name hit harder than the sound. He didn't move, didn't answer. The voice came again. I know you're down here. A faint click, a beam of light cut through the darkness from the tunnel entrance, sweeping slowly across the stone walls. Caleb's jaw tightened. Derek Boone. It had to be. The beam moved closer, then landed on Titan. The dog didn't flinch, didn't step back. He held his ground, eyes locked into the light. The voice followed. "There you are," Derek said, stepping into the edge of the chamber. The light shifted again, and now it landed on Caleb. Derek smiled faintly. Not friendly, not surprised. "I was wondering how long it'd take you," he said. Caleb stood slowly, stepping out from the shadows, his movements controlled. "You broke into my place," he said. Derek shrugged slightly. "You found something that doesn't belong to you." Caleb didn't respond. Behind Derek, another figure stood in the tunnel. Younger, quiet, watching. Back up. Caleb's eyes flicked to him, then back. Derek took a few steps forward, his boots echoing faintly against the stone. "This land," he said, glancing around the chamber. "I've been watching it for years." His light moved across the crates, the panels, the walls. "You think you're the first one to notice something's off?" Caleb's voice came out low. "Then why didn't you take it?" Derek's smile thinned. "Because I didn't know where to dig." A pause. "Oh, then. But now I do." Titan's growl deepened. Derek's eyes shifted toward him. "That dog's gonna be a problem," he said calmly. Caleb stepped slightly in front of Titan. "No," he said. "You are." The air tightened. Derek exhaled slowly, adjusting his grip on the flashlight. "Let's not make this complicated," he said. "You walk away, we handle what's down here, and everybody goes home." Caleb didn't blink. "Not happening." Derek's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. The second man shifted his stance slightly, preparing. Titan reacted first. A sudden movement, fast, precise. The dog lunged forward with a sharp bark, breaking the tension in an instant. Derek stepped back, surprised just enough. "Hey!" Too late. Titan hit him hard, knocking the light from his hand. It clattered across the stone, spinning wildly, beams of light flashing across the chamber. The second man moved forward, reaching for Titan. Caleb intercepted him. A hard shove, enough to throw him off balance. The man stumbled back into the tunnel wall. "Back off!" Caleb snapped. Titan stood between them now, teeth bared, body rigid, protecting. Derek recovered quickly, anger replacing the calm. "You don't get it," he said sharply. "This isn't yours." Caleb didn't move. "It is now." The silence snapped. Derek lunged forward. Titan met him. A collision of movement, fast and sudden. The dog drove into him again, forcing him back, claws scraping against stone as the two struggled for position. "Get him off!" the second man shouted, moving in again. Caleb stepped forward, blocking him. "Stay back!" The man hesitated, just for a second. Enough. And Titan held his ground, pushing Derek backward until his footing slipped against the uneven surface. He hit the wall hard, breath knocked from him. The chamber fell still, heavy, breathing, tension thick enough to break. Derek didn't move for a second. Then slowly, he raised his hands. "All right," he said, breath uneven now. "All right." Titan didn't back off, didn't blink. Caleb stepped forward slightly, his voice steady. "Leave." Derek looked at him, really looked this time. Something shifted. Not fear, not defeat. Calculation. "You think this is over?" he said quietly. Caleb didn't answer. Derek nodded once, pushing himself off the wall. "This place," he added, glancing around the chamber again. "It's bigger than you." He stepped back toward the tunnel. "Bigger than both of us." The second man followed. A Titan tracked every movement, muscles still tight, ready. Derek stopped at the edge of the tunnel, turned, and gave one last look. "I'll be back," he said. Then he disappeared into the darkness. The sound of their footsteps faded. Gone. The chamber fell silent again. Caleb stood there, breathing slowly, his hands still slightly raised. Titan remained in position for a few seconds longer. Then, slowly, he relaxed. Just a little. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Titan turned his head slightly, and that's when Caleb saw it. Blood. A thin line along the dog's side. Not deep, but enough. Caleb's chest tightened. "Hey." He dropped to one knee, his hand moving carefully along Titan's fur, checking the wound. "It's all right," he said softly. "Oh, you're all right." Titan didn't pull away, didn't flinch. He just stayed there. Close. Caleb exhaled slowly, his hand resting against the dog's side. "They're not done," he said. Not a question. A fact. Titan looked at him, and in that look, there was no doubt, no hesitation. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The climb back up felt longer this time, not because the tunnel had changed, but because Caleb had. Every step carried weight now, responsibility, risk, something close to purpose. Titan moved slower beside him, favoring his side just enough for Caleb to notice. "Easy," Caleb said quietly. The dog ignored it. Of course he did. They reached the surface just as the first light of morning began to break across the horizon. A pale gray washed over the vineyard, softening the edges of the dead vines, turning the land into something almost gentle. Almost. Caleb pulled himself up, then turned immediately, reaching down to steady Titan as he climbed out. The dog landed with a soft thud, pausing for a moment before standing fully. Caleb crouched beside him, running his hands carefully along the wound again. "Still not deep," he said, "but we're not ignoring it." Titan's ears flicked, but he stayed still. For once. Back in the shack, Caleb moved with quiet urgency. He cleaned the wound with what little water he had left, his hands steady, precise. Years of training hadn't left him completely. "You've had worse," he muttered, "but that doesn't mean you take it lightly." Titan didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He just watched Caleb, calm, trusting. When Caleb finished, he leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Oh, that's the last of it," he said, glancing at the empty container. No water left, not above ground. He looked toward the vineyard, then back at Titan. "Good thing you found more." Outside, the sun climbed higher, and for the first time since Caleb had arrived, the land didn't feel like it was pushing him away. It felt like it was waiting. He stepped out, Titan following, slower but steady. Caleb moved directly to the opening. This time, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed an old length of scrap pipe from beside the shack, then a few pieces of broken wood. Nothing perfect, nothing polished, but enough. He knelt at the edge of the hole, studying the angle of the tunnel beneath. "Water flows downhill," he said quietly. "We just have to give it a way up." Titan sat beside him, watching, listening. Caleb lowered the pipe carefully into the opening, adjusting its position until it caught the edge of the underground channel. It took time, trial, error, repositioning, but eventually, he felt it settle. He waited. Nothing. He adjusted again, tilted it slightly. Then, a sound. Soft, rising. A thin line of water appeared at the top of the pipe, hesitating for a second before spilling over the edge. Caleb froze, then leaned closer. "Come on!" The flow strengthened. Not much, but steady. Real. Water. Above ground. Caleb let out a breath that turned into something between a laugh and disbelief. "There you go," he said. "That's it." Titan stood, stepped closer. watched the water trickle onto the dry earth. The ground absorbed it instantly. Hungry. Caleb didn't stop. He worked for hours, extending the flow, digging shallow channels, redirecting what little water he could bring up. By midday, a narrow path of damp soil stretched across a small section of the vineyard. It wasn't much, but it was something, and something was all he needed. Caleb stood back, hands on his hips, breathing hard. "This is how it starts," he said. Titan moved beside him, his tail giving a slow, measured sway. Not excitement. Not yet. But recognition. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah," he murmured. "You see it too." The day passed differently, faster, full. Every movement had purpose now, every step built on the last. The land responded slowly, but it responded. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was changing. By late afternoon, Caleb noticed something else. Not the water, not the soil, the air. It felt different, softer, not alive in a way it hadn't been before. He crouched near one of the vines, brushing his fingers lightly against the base. Nothing visible. Not yet. But something had shifted. Behind him, Titan barked once, sharp, alert. Caleb turned instantly. At the edge of the property, a truck had stopped. Derek Boone, leaning against the side, arms crossed, watching, not hiding anymore, not pretending, just standing there. Caleb straightened slowly. Titan moved to his side, body tense. The distance between them stretched across the dry land, heavy with everything that had already happened. Derek pushed himself off the truck, took a few steps forward, then stopped. "You're working fast," he called out. Caleb didn't respond. Derek nodded slightly, eyes moving across the damp soil, the makeshift channels, the pipe feeding water upward. "Didn't think you'd figure it out that quick." Caleb's voice came low. "Didn't think you'd come back this soon." Derek smiled faintly. "Told you I would." A pause, then, "This isn't over," he added. Caleb stepped forward slightly. "No," he said. "It's not." The two men stood there, neither moving closer, neither backing away. Titan let out a low growl. Derek's eyes flicked toward him. "Dog's loyal," he said. Caleb didn't look down. "More than most people." Derek chuckled softly. "Yeah," he said. "That might be your problem." He turned back toward his truck. "Enjoy it while you can." Then he got in. The engine started. Dust rose again as the vehicle pulled away. Caleb stood there long after it was gone. Titan stayed beside him, unmoving, watching. Finally, Caleb exhaled slowly. "Oh, they're not stopping," he said. Titan didn't respond. Didn't need to. Caleb looked back at the vineyard, at the thin lines of water cutting through the dry ground, at the land that had already begun to change. Then he nodded once. "Good," he said quietly, because neither was he. And for the first time, the land wasn't just surviving, it was breathing again. Time didn't change everything at once. It never does. At first, it was small, so small that anyone passing by might have missed it. A patch of soil that stayed dark longer than the rest. A line of moisture that didn't disappear by midday. A single vine that didn't look as brittle as the others. But Caleb saw it. Every inch, every shift, every sign that something beneath the surface was waking up. Weeks passed, then months. The system underground became something he understood. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. He reinforced the opening, secured the flow, redirected water with steady hands and quiet patience. Titan stayed with him through all of it, always close, always watching. The wound along his side healed slowly, leaving behind a faint line beneath his fur, a reminder of the night everything changed. He moved differently now, not weaker, wiser, more deliberate. Caleb noticed. He noticed everything now. The way Titan would pause at certain points in the vineyard, as if checking something invisible. The way he listened, to the ground, to the wind, to things Caleb still couldn't always hear. "Yeah," Caleb said one morning, crouching beside him. "You knew before I did." Titan glanced at him briefly, then went back to watching the land. That the seasons shifted. Slow, steady. The air changed first, less dry, less empty. Then the soil, holding moisture longer. Then the vines, not all of them, not even most, but enough. Tiny signs at first, a subtle swelling along the wood, a slight change in color. Then one day, green, a single curl of it, fragile, uncertain, but real. Caleb knelt beside it, his hand hovering just above, not touching. "Look at that," he whispered. Titan stood beside him, still, watching. Caleb let out a breath that carried more weight than he realized. It's working. And it was. Not fast, not easy, but real. The vineyard began to change, line by line, row by row. People started to notice. At first it was just passing glances, drivers slowing down slightly, curious eyes lingering a second longer than before. Well, then came questions, then conversations, then respect, not loud, not immediate, but growing. Caleb didn't chase it, didn't need it. He had something else now, something stronger, purpose, and Titan, always Titan. Derek Boone came back. Of course he did. Not once, not twice, but many times, each visit shorter than the last, each look less certain. He stood at the edge of the property, watching as the land he once dismissed began to shift into something alive, something valuable, something real. But he didn't cross the line again. Not after that night. Not after the dog. Caleb never spoke to him again. Didn't need to. Some things settled themselves. Years passed. The shack changed, repaired, strengthened, no longer leaning, no longer waiting to fall. The vineyard followed. Green spread slowly, and then steadily, until it no longer looked like something abandoned. It looked like something chosen, something cared for, something alive. And Caleb changed with it. The weight he carried didn't disappear. It never does. But it shifted. Lighter. Manageable. He slept more. Not every night. But enough. The silence didn't press in anymore. It rested. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, painting the vineyard in gold, Caleb stood at the edge of the rows, hands resting loosely at his sides. Titan sat beside him, older now, slower, but still sharp, still present, still there. Caleb glanced down at him. "You remember the first day?" he asked. Titan's ears flicked slightly. Caleb smiled faintly. "Didn't think this place had anything left in it." The wind moved softly through the vines, yet no longer hollow, no longer empty. Caleb looked out across the land, then back at Titan. "Did I save this place?" he said quietly. A pause. "Or did you save me?" Titan didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just stayed there, close, unmoving, steady, the same way he always had. Caleb nodded once, the answer settling into him without words. "Yeah," he said softly. The sun slipped lower. The light softened. And the land that no one wanted, stretched out before them, alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Not because it was easy, not because it was lucky, but because someone stayed. Because something loyal refused to leave. Caleb turned, walking slowly back toward the house. Titan followed, step for step, as he always had, and behind them. The vineyard breathed, not waiting anymore, not hidden, just alive, and enough. Before you go, I want to ask you something simple. Do you think Caleb saved the land, or did Titan save him? Type 1 if you believe the land changed his life. Type 0 if you believe it was the dog who never gave up on him. I read every comment, and I'd really like to hear what you think. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of strength, loyalty, or second chances, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories like this waiting for you, stories about people who lost everything, and the one moment that changed it all. I'll see you in the next one.